Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mimi Plochet, and I'm Artistic Director of the Chicago International Film Festival. And it is my pleasure today to introduce and welcome Director Andreem Končalowski, whose most recent film, Dear Comrades, is competing in the International Feature Film Competition at this year's festival. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
As a reminder to our audience, I wanted to encourage you to ask questions in the question box, and we will get to them later in the conversation. So please don't hesitate. Okay, and let's get started. So as indicated in the film, Dear Comrades is based on a real incident that happened between June 1st and June 2nd, 1962 in the provincial town of Novocherkassk in the Soviet Union. And of course, it was covered up for 30 years. So for me, the look of the film, from the really gorgeous, striking black and white photography to what is now an unusual aspect ratio, and also the great period detail struck me as I watched it for the first time and then again yesterday. So I read that recreating the period with great precision was very important to you. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, both in terms of the production design as well as the choices that you made aesthetically with the photography.
But it's I appreciate that you mentioned the look of the film. I think that very important for the look of the film to relate it somehow to the period. Mm-hmm. For example, if we do something about 90s, mm-hmm. the beginning of the 20th century, everyone who remembers some of film shots, it's all black and white, right. And to make it in color today, for me, getting kind of artificial look. Mm-hmm. I really wanted to make authentic look of 60s. And of course, the ratio of the screen is the same. Right. As a matter of fact, it's the fourth film I shoot in the same ratio. Right. My previous film was Michelangelo, and it was the same. And then I made Paradise, also the same ratio. Right. And I found this ratio is, for me, more exciting because I can see sky. Mm. It's composition-wise. You also can have a sky and the space above. Then, in 1950s came Panoscope and all this, and it becomes more and more talking heads, no space ahead. Right. And I want to have this. I like this ratio for my future films as well. The second thing, when we discuss the period, it's very thin line between making just some kind of imitation of the period or try to get into the period exactly. Every period has a smell, I would put it this way. It's the objects and even faces. Mm. It wasn't so easy for me to find these faces because I said that I want Soviet faces. Hmm. The Soviet face is different exactly as you take an American face of 1930s. It's a different face. Right. For that matter, it was a hard work to find everyone that we see should be authentic. And the third thing, of course, I shot film with a static camera. Mm. Very, very little movement. Right. It's completely different opportunity in static shot. For a filmmaker, it's a big challenge because I was learning how to make composition and movement of the camera. The camera today becomes so, with iPhone, you do whatever you want. And so many people now can use images. Right. Of inundated by images, right. Too much. So I tried to make it as little possible images in the film. And I was, it's funny, my film 10 years ago was almost 2,000 cuts. Mm-hmm. And now it's 600. Right. Very few cuts. It's very interesting. to try to make as little cuts as possible, because it's like to have $50 bills, $51 bill, or one bill, $50.
Right.
It's a different value. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to every shot. I'm trying to get a higher value.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the amazing things is, and there is a question about your decision to use the static camera, but I also think that with that static camera, there's still that sense of movement, or, because it's all happening within the frame, and there's such a great sense of urgency, even though we don't have kind of that frenetic movement of the camera. And so, I mean, I think it's so beautifully you are able to capture that sense of urgency and movement that we feel, rather than through the movement of the camera with the composition of and the choreography of the shots.
And that's what's very important that you mentioned, because when you have static camera, doesn't mean that you don't have a movement.
Exactly.
Camera can be static, but there is a lot of action inside of it.
Right.
And also, the magic of the film, and we slightly forgot about it with television and with young cinematographers that follow the movement. We forgot that film has life from and out of the frame. If
Right.
the person is in the frame, but then the person get out, it doesn't mean that it's dead.
Right.
It's somewhere there. And
Right.
that's a magic of film image, because you can imagine what can happen out of the frame.
Right.
And it's so interesting for me to involve imagination of the audience if the action is of the frame.
Right.
And it's for me, I'm making films more than 55 years, and I'm learning every time when I shoot film.
Was there something in particular that you felt that you learned this time? And I do want to go back. Oksana is asking about your decision precisely to use the static camera for this one, and also not to have a traditional score. So I was very interested in the sound design, which I think relates to the lack of a score. But if you could answer that would be great.
Let's talk about sound.
Okay.
When I made a film that was not very successful in distribution, Nutcracker, and I remember my producer, American producer, when I was doing a mix, he said, "Please, louder, please put it louder." When I said, "Why it's loud? It's already too loud." And he said, audience today, they chew popcorn, and the popcorn is very loud, and they're here. And I start to think, my goodness, I don't want people munch popcorn when they see my film, because it should be silent. And silent, you can, for that matter, my last 4 films, almost no music,
right.
but also proper sound. If you go into the mountains or in the forest or in the fields, or even in the on the river, out of the all town sounds and all of radio, and everything that is overloaded, your brain is overloaded with images and sound, and all of a sudden you hear the wind and the silence. It's extraordinary discovery how wonderful silence is, and silence is not death.
Yeah,
it's different. Silence is a whisper.
Yeah.
of nature, and I think very important for everyone who live in the big cities, especially, go and hear silence of life.
Yeah. Well, and I do think there's like a number of scenes in your film where the silence precisely itself carries the tension. A number of the meeting scenes where, you know, you hear the creak of the chair, and it's that tension between the silence and those very kind of small sounds that are relaying the atmosphere so effectively.
But you know, the tension here is not suspense in terms of suspense. The tension here in the film is the tension here is the pressure that a big amount of people, you know, the throng, enormous amounts of people staying there and asking for answer, and the people inside of the building don't have an answer because they don't have a permission, and that's basically a terror. You don't have rights to talk because you don't have a permission. And I think one of the problems of Soviet Union in that sense and our Soviet life is very direct, straight relationship, vertical. You cannot do anything without permission. And one of the problem of the society was no one was brave enough to break this silence.
Well, this actually relates to another audience question. So Josh is asking, what parts of the film were inspired by your life or your experiences? And did you have a memory of the event or any knowledge of it at the time?
No, you know, in that time, that was the time when I was discovering myself with my friend and colleague, Andrei Tarkovsky, the film business. I was a student in film school, and we were writing Andrei Rublev, and I was so involved in the film process, and I was a student, but at the same time, you know, we had this great script, Andrei Rublev, and I was very proud, almost obnoxiously proud of the success, and I didn't give a damn about whatever going on. Yes, I've heard something there, you know, there is events, but no one wanted to talk really about it because it was a total blackout.
Right.
Really blackout, forced blackout by KGB, by police, that everyone has to sign a special affidavit that you will never speak about it, etc., etc. So the whole event came to my attention in 90s with Perestroika, when the documents came out, and all of a sudden I found the story is extremely tense and interesting. And as a matter of fact, my wife, who plays the main part, Yulia Vysotskaya, we were doing in Italy Antigona, Sophocles, and I thought she is a great tragic talent, and I wanted to make a tragedy. And I started to think how I can put the character of Antigona, let's put it, in the contemporary texture, and that's how it came together. The tragic event of shooting innocent people in Novotcherkassk, and this party functionary.
Yeah, so I know that quite a bit of, research, both that came out of kind of that inquiry in the early 90s into the event, but I imagine you had to do a lot of more research in terms of writing the script. Did you talk a bit about that?
Oh, yes. I was speaking a lot with a general prosecutor who was working on this case.
Right.
And he was a great help for me because he was a main investigator the whole problem, and you know, it was a big political process, and he gave me a lot of insights. Besides, there's a lot of stenogram, everything was published, and then everything was all documents. And when I was writing a script, I was taking pages, pages from the real stenographic report, and I was putting in the script, and I talked to myself, said, my goodness, who is going to watch it? It's so boring because they're talking like party members. It's so boring.
That's a complimentary documentary. But I mean, so it's that you had done the research to create that entire backstory, which I think, even laying kind of this fictional story on top of it, you feel that sense of, or there's a tangible sense of, the historic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I tend to really to deeply study every time when I was doing a period of piece, like Paradise or Michelangelo Life. I was studying for several years, not because I want to put everything on screen.
Right.
It's not big. It's just because I want to know everything in order to select what is necessary, a minimum that is necessary to make a film. But as I used to teach my students, you have to know what is under the bed of your character.
Right.
Because under the bed of the character, there are very many different things in different countries.
Yeah.
In China, in Russia, or in America, different things under the bed, when I said.
Now, are there, I guess one question I had was, were there any, witnesses that are still surviving that you were able
to? No, they're too old.
Okay.
I mean, basically, kids, 10 years old kids in 1960s, they're already 85.
Right.
So not many. But of course, as a matter of fact, Julia Vysotskaya, who is the actress and my wife, she is from Novocherkassk.
Right.
She is from this city.
She's brilliant in the film. So, I would love to talk about, both kind of casting her, which of course she's been in several of your films. And of course, it probably helps that she's from there. But, you had mentioned earlier before when you were talking about kind of that precision for the period detail and looking for Soviet faces. And of course, there's many characters in the film that are known historical figures. So aside from casting Yulia, like who I said, I think, she's the anchor of the film. But could you talk about that process of casting the other, the two lead males, and then all of the characters and the extras around them?
There are not many actors. For example, Granddad, he is not an actor. He's real Cossack from the area.
Right.
From the area of Rostov and Novocherkassk. Basically, there are two actors that are completely unknown. They never been in the film. One is from St. Petersburg, another from Moscow. The others were all from the south, and I was really determined to take faces from the south because their pronunciation is like in the States. The South speaks differently from New England.
Right.
And I found wonderful. Frankly speaking, after so many years of working in film and studying from great Italian neorealism like De Sica, who used to use actors in the street, not actors, people.
Right.
I think there is. I prefer to use not actors. I prefer to use people. Every person from the street can be an actor. You have to give him you have to make him comfortable. And that's not my work. My work is to make everyone comfortable. As I say, director's role is something between psychotherapists and how do you call them? The nurse that helps labor the baby.
Oh, like a midwife.
Midwife.
Yes.
Director should be like between psychotherapist and midwife because you have to make laboring actor easy. Push. And that's it's easy.
Everybody is giving birth to the film.
Definitely.
Great. I wanted to go back a little bit to, you were saying you learned about this incident in like the early 90s, between 92 and 94, when they were doing basically the investigation, right? So I think one of my big questions, because, when I saw this film back in August, one of my thoughts was that it really resonates in interesting ways with kind of the political and social climate today. Especially we're coming off of protests here and I think around the world, and just kind of rethinking our relationship to government and authority as well. So I guess my question for you would be, now that that investigation happened 30 years after the incident, and now we're almost 30 years beyond that, why this film right now for you?
I have, to be frank, I had, when I made the film, when I thought about the film long time, I was never thinking how it will be related to today life or situation, political situation, especially now in the world. Mm-hmm. The question is, I think it's a eternal question: the revolt and the power, a revolt and the state. It's a constant thing, because power usually has one goal: to keep power.
Right.
And revolt is another completely different goal: to get rid of this power. And there is a constant conflict all over the world, all the time, between throng or crowd, as you call it, or people. It depends.
Right.
It depends. But the power is always can be quite cruel. The question of that particular case is that being cruelly depressing and being very cruel towards people, power wanted to hide it. And,
right.
And this blackout was extraordinary event.
Right.
In the States or whatever, Tiananmen in China, there was many times of suppression of the revolt, but it always came somehow public. That was completely different, because 100,000 people were given to sign a paper that if they will talk, they can be condemned even to death.
Right.
So the terror of the people. That's why no one talked about it, and we didn't know about it, because 100,000 people were dumb, were completely numb. Not dumb, numb.
Right.
And that's very important. That the explosion came when almost most of them were dead. No one wanted to talk about it. And in the film, as you see in the film, even policeman doesn't want to talk about it because he's afraid he's going to be persecuted to tell the truth.
Well, I think one of the things that you so beautifully do with the characters is it's both about power, but it's also about this tension between power and ideology, right? And to varying degrees. I mean, like Liuda, at the beginning of the film, she's very committed to, of course, the ideological project, of the Soviet state. And, I love the way that you structure the film, and that the real true moment of crisis of, if we want to call it faith or belief for her, really doesn't come until the last 10, 15 minutes of the film. But, over that kind of 24, 30 hour period, there's a slow kind of disintegration. And so, and so I think, both in terms of the other kind of the men like Loginov or Viktor, the KGB agent, that we see that they have very different relationships to power and ideology. So I tend not to completely agree with you in terms of word ideology. There is no thing without ideology. Right.
Everything, even say I'm out of ideology, is already ideology.
Right.
In that sense, what is important about ideology is an idea that leads, that one person can be indoctrinated.
Right.
Indoctrination is different thing, because indoctrination means limit your vision. You're not open to other things. You see only that. There are many times in civilization and different cultures when this limitation and indoctrination made people fanatical.
Right.
It was in European culture, and it was in Muslim culture, everywhere. So the question here is, for me, I was thinking about this people who, fighting the war and who were communists. Most of these Soviet people were pretty pure, innocent, and very sincere.
Right.
They believed that they're building communism.
Right.
And they were indoctrinated in terms of very strict in their thinking. But when this idea comes into the conflict with the reality, this dogma, this indoctrination starts to crack.
Right.
And that became a tragic.
Right.
And of course, as you know, so many communists around the world were destroyed mentally by the Khrushchev and by the de-Stalinization. In that sense, 30s and 40s create a lot of very ideal people.
Right.
Idealistic. They're
Right.
idealistic. They believe it's possible to create ideal society, but they didn't know when it comes and how much it costs.
Right. Well, and I
It
think
costs too expensive.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, obviously, we see that in the film with the potential loss of her daughter. But, again, going back to the way that the structure of the film is that we're left in this moment where, she has lost kind of a belief in these ideals that she held so highly. And I think the big question is, and I love the way you end the film, but what happens next for somebody when that happens? Like, where does she go from here? And, I think we have to imagine, but
for me, it's very important not to give you the answers,
yeah.
final answer, because it's very interesting when you touch a real emotional side of the audience, of the spectator,
Mm-hmm.
and the spectator is touched and involved into a moral problem, not in the story itself, like in Hitchcock, but in the moral problem of moral problems of Godfather, of Coppola.
Right.
You never have an answer.
Right.
You also involve into decision, and you invite audience to think what could have happened and what will happen.
Right.
And it's, for me, the most important result of my film, usually. If people would like to know the answer, and I never answer, and they then go home and they discuss.
Right.
And if they discuss, and if they fight, and if they make their points, this is the most important part of, I think, of art itself.
Right.
Because for me, art is, from one side, it's a fairy tale. On another side, it can be political and socially important awareness. But the most important is ethical choice that the audience should make itself.
Right.
And
then
you grow.
Yeah.
You grow when you make decision.
Right.
And I'd like to leave audience to make their own decisions.
Right. Great. Well, I think with that, we'll have the audience continue to think about, yes, if what is next. I would, can you just talk about what's next for you? Because I know you said you've been self-quarantining, and what can we expect from you next year?
Let's see. I would like to make a series about revolution.
Okay.
Because revolution in Russia, first of all, it was extraordinary development and event, but during the Soviet Union, revolution was shown as absolutely positive. Then after perestroika, revolution was something became something monstrous and very negative. And I think important part to understand is history is to be ambivalent. Everyone has its own right to be wrong.
Right.
It's very important. That's what I would like to try to examine and study in my possible project about the revolution.
Great. Well, we look forward to seeing it.
Thank you.
I wanted to thank you so much, one, for making this really beautiful, moving, and complicated film that will keep us thinking, and for sharing it with our audiences. And as always, we look forward to seeing what's next.
You know, your thankfulness is the most important for me, the most important reward as a director. When the audience is thankful, that's the most important.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.